Welcome to Season 4 of the Powered by Rock podcast. We'll bring you the best stories in rock music with a focus on highlighting independent rock musicians and their music from all over the world. No, rock music isn't dead. It's getting better and better. It's just time for you to start paying attention again. With that said, let's get this party started.
The mountain's gonna rise and fall by me.
All right. Hey, welcome to the Powered by Rock podcast. I'm your host, Isaac Kuhlman, and today I wanted to actually talk about a topic that I got inspired by when I was listening to an episode of Signal Chords, Home of the Underground. I think it was their first season, so it's episode 3. It was a conversation between my buddies Brad Nunnery at Signal Chords and John Montross at Punk Rock Radar, when both of them suggested that acoustic songs, as well as intros and interludes, should not be released with an album on streaming sites, as it might be the first time someone listens to it and kind of throws them off and basically says, you know what, I don't like this band because of this song. I have great respect for both of these guys, and I'm going to explain why they're absolutely right to a certain degree and why they are dead wrong about how these types of songs should be released and why they have great purpose for music lovers. I want to preface this by saying that both of these guys heavily suggested that they quite literally don't care much about the lyrics to a song at first, and sometimes never, but they rather focus on great melodies and catchy music. And I truly do love a great melodic song, a great melody, but I have to disagree with the part about lyrics as someone like myself who has spent most of his life writing songs and writing poetry. So there is a difference here between consuming music and appreciating an art form. And that's the part that I want to talk about today. So let's just go ahead and jump into this fun conversation and see if I can disagree with my homies without starting an internet feud. I'm going to start with hot take number 1. Hot take number 1 is that music fans absolutely need to start listening to full albums again. This used to be a very common thing up until about the year 2000, and then suddenly everybody stopped listening to full albums because they could just download stuff and listen to the songs that they like. Now, why do I think that music fans should actually listen to albums again? Well, number 1, it's the way the artist intends the music to be listened to. So in a track order, they have a track listing, right? So this is song 1 all the way through song whatever, 15, 10, whatever the last song on the album is. They want you to listen to it in that order. There are very many musicians who spend days, weeks, and months trying to make sure that they have that kind of flow done right. And if you have vinyl, like you can see some of my vinyl here on the wall, you have to actually flip the album over. So the first side should be kind of like one kind of full loop. So like it's kind of comes in, goes out. And then the next side should do the exact same thing. So a really good album even thinks about the vinyl experience or the user experience when they're actually listening to it. You want to get up after a song that you just listened to and go, man, that was a great way to end that side, flip it over, and then listen to the other side, which does the exact same thing for you. Now, here's a couple other things. A track list can actually make or break an album. And I'm not going to say that there's a lot of albums where I've ever thought, oh man, this is just kind of haphazard. It's like thrown in there. Doesn't really work out that well. But I will give an example here shortly of an album that, because they don't use kind of other things in the album and don't have a good start and stop kind of, segments in their album, it doesn't hit quite right. I also say that acoustic songs, interludes, intros, outros all have their place in an album. As singles, they have no context. So John is actually exactly right about that point. Here's an example. So on Mercy Music's new album, and I actually have it down there, I talked about it in the last episode as well, but Mercy Music's new album, What You Stand to Lose, there are songs within that album, especially at the end, that, and just some of the other albums too, but like their last song on that album, I think it's Waiting to Begin, from memory is what it's called, but it's an acoustic song. And if you listen to the whole album and then you listen to that song, you are absolutely hammered by the heavy sound, the darkness, the feeling that actually the rest of their singles don't capture, or the rest of their songs don't necessarily capture, because they're all basically upbeat songs that don't rely on you listening to the lyrics. But that particular song makes you listen to the lyrics and actually it forces you to take notice of that dark tone, that dark theme that the entire album actually has had all along. It's like a twist ending. It's like an M. Night Shyamalan movie. It's, whatever you want to think about it. But without songs like that, you don't get the full user experience about what the artists are trying to convey. If you just listen to singles, yeah, sure, you can get 2.5 minute dopamine kind of rush or whatever of listening to that song. But that's not the way that the artist intends you to actually dig into it. Sure, you can have a great time. They don't mind that you listen to it and you love it for that surface level kind of music and that melody and all that stuff. But they're not just writing songs just for the sake of writing a good melody or hook, right? Again, I love music that has great melodies and hooks, but I also like to have that context, that underlying kind of theme, or a deeper meaning behind a song too, because then it's really become art, right? And albums usually bring out diversity of a band's skills, because what they do is it's they fully flesh out what they're trying to achieve with different soundscapes, different start stop time. So like instead of every song being 2.5 minutes, then you might have a 1.5 minute intro, and then you got like a 4-minute song, 3-minute song, 6-minute song. Albums allow bands to actually test their boundaries, experiment with new things. And without that, then the creative process kind of dies, and you're just listening to the same goddamn thing all the time. And that is not the way that music should be, focused on, looked at, listened to, consumed even, right? So I'm telling you guys, stop listening just to singles. If you like a band, go listen to a full fucking album for once. It is going to change the way you look at these bands. Here's an example of a band that absolutely has a really good album, but they don't actually kind of rely on that. They just basically kind of threw together 10 songs that I assume, like when they wrote them all individually, but they didn't think about how they were going to go in an album. And maybe they did, I don't know. But the band is called Colors Fade. It was an album that came out, I believe, this year. It's 10 tracks, but they all sound like they were all just written as singles, because they're really catchy, they're really fast, they're really fire, but they may pretty much end up be the same song to me, because they all have a similar formula, and almost all of them start with a guitar intro. I think like 8 out of the 10 songs start with a guitar intro. So it's like a very formulaic way to write music. Now, I'm not saying that's bad or anything like that. What I'm saying is the creative process of building an album didn't seem to be conceptualized in this process. I like this album a lot. They have all the songs individually are great, but let me read you a snippet from my album review that kind of explains exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about writing the same song 10 times. I say in the review, I said, now the 10-song album has one drawback for me personally. As much as I love to go apeshit for 20 straight minutes at a live show, I do get fatigued from the same fast pace, both literally, as it's pretty difficult to keep rocking out for that long without being winded. But after a few songs that have the same pacing, so same tempo, same drum beat, kind of same formula of that, and even somewhat the same songwriting formula, and like I said, count how many songs start with a guitar intro, your ear starts to wander, and you find yourself spacing out when the songs are all still absolutely fire individually. Therefore, while I can't point to any single song and say, oh, that shouldn't be on there, or nah, that one's not great, what I can say is that as a whole album, I feel like there should be some sort of a break in the chaos for how fast these guys can play. Without that break in the chaos, you just get the same thing. You just get kind of fatigued. Your ear doesn't really pick up anything anymore. There are a bunch of skate punk bands that I could have put in there. I just wanted to capture that one because I know Colors Fades is a great band, and I know that on their next album they'll probably go crazy again. But what I will say is it's a pretty stereotypical thing for skate punk bands to just go ahead and make 10 to 12 straight punk skate punk songs on their album with no break, no variation, no differentiation in the songs. And that's great for a genre. But for me, as a music lover, as somebody who writes music, as somebody who appreciates music as an art, it gets tiresome. I can't listen to much skate punk these days because of that exact same process. If they were writing different kind of variations of songs, bringing different tempos, even bringing in a different, bring in a horn for a song or bring in a violin, I don't care, but pace it to where it's slightly different. Those songs, when they do that, are usually some of my favorite songs on an album. The band Brake Lights from Austin, Texas actually had a couple songs on their last album that literally, because they slowed a tempo down or played an acoustic song in the middle of it, they're actually my favorite songs on that album. So if you're looking at, bands that maybe do this really well, there's a ton of them out there because they understand that you can't just listen to the same song a bunch of times in a row. Here's hot take number 2. John Montross from Punk Rock Radar is not wrong when he says that acoustic songs, intros, and interludes should not be released on streaming due to it possibly ruining the user experience when shuffling or solely listening to singles. So, John, you're right. I fucking hate when I hear an intro song while I'm shuffling through like a bunch of my like songs, right? I can't tell you how many times I had to skip some filler songs that I would normally love when I first started using Spotify because I cluelessly just shuffled all my like songs to see if I could get a good mix. Or I went to the release radar, right? And just play something. And it's going to be a lot of singles, obviously, but there's like remixes of songs on there that I freaking absolutely hate. I'm like, I don't want the remix of a song. I want to hear the damn song. So I would just skip these songs. Even if that song was on an album, I might listen to it, right? So here's some examples. Bands like Rush, Pink Floyd, Primus. These are 3 of my absolutely favorite bands of all time. There's so many other great bands, even like Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. They may have off-the-wall tracks that just make no sense to put into a shuffle mix. And I would love to keep listening to them because I want to support that band. Not that they need it because they're all pretty well off, but I would say that I have to skip them constantly during these shuffle mixes, or if I'm just listening to like a mix of my own music or whatever, because they just absolutely don't fit with whatever I'm listening to. I might go from a Real Big Fish song to, a song from Ummagumma that just makes no sense. And it's like just soundscape for 3 minutes of just them banging pots or walking around in the background. So you have to skip it because you're like, I know where this is going. I don't want to sit through this right now. Now, if I'm listening to the album, I have absolutely no problem listening to tracks like that because it sets up everything. It's the theme, the soundscapes, all that stuff that kind of give back that user experience when listening to an album. During shuffle mixes and release radar singles and all that stuff, they don't have a place, which is unfortunate that that's how almost everybody listens to music nowadays. So without the context of the album, these songs almost become annoying to encounter on a streaming service if you're listening only to singles or shuffling a bunch of like songs. So for me, I almost always started to dislike a band almost, right? Like I'm like, oh man, it's another Primus song. I know this is an 8-minute song. I don't have the, bandwidth, the brain power right now to sit through an 8-minute song because I'm either, kind of in a different mode. I might be riding my bike and, I want to listen to something more upbeat, right? So I would actually skip that. And then after I've had to skip that song and another 8-minute song or another 6-minute song, an intro song, a filler song, an instrumental song perhaps, and I'm skipping all these songs, while I'm trying to ride a bike or, do whatever I do, I'm kind of finding it annoying to go back and forth on this, right? So I absolutely agree with John here, and that these things should not be released on streaming to the point where people can put them into shuffles and they appear on, here's a suggested song from this band, and that's your first, interaction. Or even if you knew the album or the band and it's just not part of that wheelhouse, right? I actually used to have a Pandora subscription. Well, I don't know if it was a subscription. I don't remember if I paid for it or not, but a band like Explosions in the Sky used to come on all the time. I never really had a problem with it because usually when I was doing it, the band, the music would come on kind of with other things that were similar. So like if I'm listening to Cake and Silver Sun Pickups, and then all of a sudden Explosions in the Sky song came on, that was pretty fair, right? Like that was a well-crafted, mix. But if it was like, on Spotify where I just shuffle all my like songs, I'm not getting that curated list that I created through a Pandora channel or whatever, right? And you could do the same thing on Spotify. I'm not saying you can't, but usually speaking, if you're listening to instrumental songs while you're listening to, or if an instrumental song or an intro song comes on during something that you're listening to that's completely out of the blue, or opposite of what that genre or that niche is, you're going to get frustrated that it keeps coming up. So in my opinion, I agree. I think that people should actually, number one, start listening to full albums. But number two, these songs shouldn't even be released on streaming. Now, obviously, past songs from previous albums long ago, they're there. They're not getting pulled down. But I'll talk about this a little bit more right after this break, because what I want to do next is kind of talk about how the music industry itself needs to start changing the way they release music so that us as fans can also have a better experience. So right now I'm going to take a break and, talk about that 3 more hot takes right after this, but don't go anywhere. The Powered by Rock podcast will return right after this.
Reverend Guitars embodies the idea that every run of scorching lead and every roll of finger-picked twang deserve the same passion and commitment to quality. Whether you're selling out arenas or playing in your living room, we know that what makes an instrument powerful is when players wield them to create something remarkable. A melody that moves mountains, a riff that just won't quit. We want to be there in your hands when that happens. For us, that means staying true to what we believe. Somewhere along the road of electric guitar history, it became a crazy idea that guitar makers should craft guitars with the same sense of purpose and passion, whether they're played in a bedroom or an arena. If that's a wild idea, then we're in the right place, carrying 6 strings and an attitude, and we're in good company. Reverend Guitars. Well played.
Running your own music career is incredibly difficult. Trying to get people to like, share, comment, listen, follow, it's all just overwhelming. Most musicians give up before they ever achieve success, and that's the worst. If you're looking for a better way to grow your music career, head to DIYrockcareer.com for some absolutely free training. It costs you nothing, and it could be the difference between hitting your goals and quitting your dream. Go to DIYrockcareer.com today by clicking the link below this episode.
Then I lost my way.
All right, welcome back to the Powered by Rock podcast. In this segment, I want to talk to the musicians and artists about how you can help yourself and your fan base by changing up the way you release your music. So here's hot take number 3. Artists shouldn't be releasing an entire album to streaming sites. Hear me out. I know that this seems crazy, but just listen to this. So it's my personal opinion that albums shouldn't be released on streaming services due to the fact that, as John and Brad both pointed out, and everybody fucking knows, artists receive absolutely nothing from being played on streaming platforms unless they have a huge hit or a massive fan base, usually by being signed to a major record label. So indie bands, DIY rock bands, unless you're somehow connected to a crap load of people and your song goes viral or something like that on TikTok, which isn't the easiest thing in the world, it's probably not the best thing to do to release an entire album on a streaming site. For bands that have small to mid-sized followings and release their music independently or on an indie label, they should only be releasing singles on streaming platforms and then selling the full albums either on Bandcamp as digital downloads or through physical distribution of vinyl, CDs, and cassettes, or whatever other medium they get creative with. So let me just break down some things for you. I'm going to break this down into the reasons why essentially this should be done. But DIY artists and indie bands usually make more money from 10 to 20 physical copies sold than they do from all their streams in the month an album is released. So for example, if a band sells just 20 vinyls, they can earn about $260 in profit. And that's just on I'm just based that on a $12 cost, right? So including the distribution, like the making of it, the packaging, the actual pressing, all that stuff of an album, plus the shipping cost to get it to you or shipping it out. It might cost the band about $12 to $13, and then they might sell it for $15. So if they get $13 profit on 20 sales, that's $260 in profit just on 20 vinyls, right? So if they only sold 20, they would make $260. That is a rough equivalent of 78,000 streams on Spotify, which is not even that easy to get. So if you're only got like 6,000 followers on Spotify, you might never have 78,000 streams in a month, which means you'll never get $260 in any single month. Now let's talk about this. Let's scale it up. If you sell 100 vinyls, you would make, 5 times that. So around 1,000, 1,100 and some dollars, something like that. That's the rough equivalent of 390,000 streams. I don't know a lot of bands that have 390,000 streams in any given month, let alone during an album release. Now, bands sure do get a million streams, even if they're not that highly, known or anything like that. Those things usually are a result of getting viral, having a very, fervent fan base of teenagers or whatever that kind of share this music a lot. But then they go out on the road and nobody shows up to their shows because they've never really grew an actual live fan base, right? When you can't sell physical copies, you have to stream on Spotify. When you can't stream on Spotify, you can't get streams on Spotify, you have to sell physical copies. So why are you releasing your entire album and negating the fact that people can actually buy this thing from you, right? Bands need to make money from their music, as that's their main product. It's their main thing that they create. Though for some reason, everyone thinks that t-shirts and merch are the only way to help support musicians these days, which are all great, don't get me wrong. But the band isn't putting their heart and souls into selling you merch. They don't care that much about the t-shirt you buy. They put hours and years into certain things, right? With like their songwriting. It might take them a full year to write even an EP. Do you think that that's going to mean more to them when you buy that or, purchase, a physical copy of that versus you buying a t-shirt? Yeah, sure. The t-shirt's cool, whatever. They didn't create that t-shirt. They might have got a design made, or they might have even created the design, but that would be what, a week's worth of work, 2 weeks worth of work versus a year's worth of work putting into music. So really think and address the situation as a music fan and as an artist. What do you actually want to stand for? Do you want to make music the thing that you're actually producing for people to consume? Or do you want people to support you through trinkets like stickers and pins and stuff like that? I bet most musicians want their music to be the thing that pushes them forward, right? And that's what I want most for people. Obviously, them playing live helps a lot too, because they're going to make some money from that. But again, even if they just sold 100 or 200 vinyls, they make way more money from that than they do from, any amount of streaming service. Especially like most bands I know make more money from releasing an album than they do in an entire album or entire year of streaming on Spotify and all the other streaming services. So keep that in mind as a fan and keep that in mind as an artist. Hot take number 4, acoustic tracks, intros, interludes, exit songs are all great for albums. So this is where I'm going to show John and Brad that they are dead wrong. Not all songs need words, and the music and soundscapes absolutely help build an album's theme, setting, and experience. Without these songs, you don't get the full experience that the artist is trying to, convey to you, right? There are other things that are going on with these songs. Sometimes there's a concept album going on that you can't quite pick up from a single or two, right? You might hear them say, oh, this song's about that. This song's about that. And you don't quite understand that the whole song has a connecting theme. Again, Mercy Music's new album, What You Stand to Lose, is a very good, example of this. If you listen to the songs in order, you'll understand why the songs are there. And even if you don't, they will still have their intended effect on you. So if you hear a song that doesn't have words, or if you hear, a longer song, a slower song, an acoustic song, you'll get the intended effect when you listen to the whole album. A great example is the song Window by Magazine Beach, which if you just played it as a single makes almost no sense as to why I think it's amazing. There are no instruments in the song at all. It's layered a cappella vocal tracks, but it's fire. I'm telling you, it's an absolutely great track. However, if you just listen to the single and just said, okay, I'm going to go look up Window by Magazine Beach and see what the fuck Isaac's talking about. How great is this song? You'd be like, all right, it's a good song. Go through the album and then get to that. I think it's the 5th or 6th song on the album. By the time you get there, you just go, whoa, what's this doing here? Like, this is insanely appropriate for what this album is. And just the way that they, kind of put that track together or put the tracking together, you're just going to be blown away, in my opinion. Some of my absolute favorite albums of the past few years have either an instrumental track, an intro, an outro, or some sort of acoustic song, or what I call a change of pace song on them. Songs that just slow things down, songs that may be more of a ballad. Millencolins' The Ballad is a great example of that. An ending song at the end of a skate punk's album that just really brings down the tempo, and it just ends the album in a great way. Penny Bridge Pioneers is the album that I'm referring to. So if you love skate punk, just go listen to Penny Bridge Pioneers and realize that this is exactly what really good bands do, right? The Ballad by Millencolin is one of their best songs. Most people who have ever listened to that band know that song really, really well. It's one of their most popular songs. You would be remiss if you didn't know that song. And if you just listen to the singles, which the singles are great too, like No Cigar and Fox, I believe both of those are on that album. Great songs, great album, but listen to the whole goddamn thing, right? Hot take number 5, song lyrics should matter more to musicians and fans. Now, John, Brad, I understand why most people will think, okay, I like to listen to the melody. I like to get the music in me before then I start digging into the lyrics and songwriting, but it should matter what the song is about. It really should. Again, he mentioned Frenzal Rhomb. John mentioned Frenzal Rhomb's new Cup of Pestilence album and how they use Australian slang. Having been to Australia and understanding a lot of the slang that he's referring to, I absolutely love that album, but it's not because of the slang, and it's not because he's throwing the C word, he's just saying cunt in every song. He's literally going through and writing songs that are really funny in an Australian humor way. So like, if you like Australian humor, you're going to really laugh. Like, you're going to laugh through almost that entire album. It's really well done, but there's other songs in there that aren't just all humorous either. So that's a great example that John brings up, not because it's a song that doesn't matter about what he's singing, but it does matter because what he's talking about is meaningful, right? So songwriting is an art form. Even if the songs aren't written with a lot of great meaning, it takes talent to put it together, and it should be appreciated. Fans should want to understand what they're listening to, what the songwriter is intending to say to them. The classic Nirvana line from the song, I'm gonna have to remember the song, but it's I think it's in Bloom, where he's saying like, he's the one who likes all our pretty songs, but he knows not what it means, right? And he likes to sing along, but he knows not what it means. That line is essentially people who just are listening to music without knowing. I still come back to this comment that I saw on social media where a guy was mad at Rage Against the Machine for essentially talking about how they disliked Republican conservatism or something like that. And the guy's like, oh, now I see how you guys are. You're liberal fascists or whatever, and I'm never going to listen to your music again. And anybody who's ever listened to Rage Against the Machine absolutely knows that their music would have told you that's what they're actually saying the entire time, right? They're talking about, indigenous people's rights, minority rights, people of color rights, right? And they're talking about essentially how corrupt the government is, and it's fixed to help rich people. Why that pissed somebody off 20 years after they released an album or their last album or whatever is beyond me, because what machine did you think that they were raging against, right? That was one of the comments, next one. So it's like, these things actually matter. Songwriting is absolutely one of the most paramount things that people can talk about when discussing music. I'll give you another couple of examples. So Typhoon out of Portland. I cannot remember the lead singer's name off the top of my head, but that dude is I want to say it's Ben. I can't remember his last name, but that guy is an absolutely phenomenal songwriter. Almost all of his song lyrics will crush you, like legitimately, like sad, but like kind of set to happy melodies. So you don't get that sad unless you start to think about what he's talking about. Tim Kasher of Cursive, he's been around for, it's got to be close to almost 30 years now, from different bands, The Good Life, his solo stuff, but Cursive is his main stuff. He writes phenomenally well. And I'll give you one more, one that you probably haven't heard of, is the Sacramento band Oh Lonesome Anna, who has actually appeared on this show. I had talked to Evan Bailey from that band, and they actually reimagined poetry of their close friend into music with songs like Glad You Got Out, But I Miss You. This is a song about how the subject's mom, so it's a guy, right? And he grows up. His mom got out of a long time abusive relationship, but she only did so because she died of cancer. But also the son feels bad for making his mom feel like shit by being mean to her while she was alive, because he didn't understand all the stuff that she was going through. He's basically saying like, you need to get out of this relationship. He's bad for you. He used to beat you. He used to beat me. I don't know how you can stay with this guy. And he's, berating his mom about these things over the course of their lifetime. Then she dies of cancer. And then he says, I'm glad you got out, but I miss you. I mean, holy fuck. That's a very meaningful song, right? This stuff matters. When you listen to songs, when you listen to albums, you start to dig into this stuff. If you just get 2.5 minutes, you're probably not going to spend any time digging. So again, you should absolutely be listening to albums, not just singles. If you like a single, sure, just keep listening to singles for a while, but find a single that you really like, then go listen to that goddamn album. So I hope I have given you some food for thought today about why you should be listening to full albums and why, as artists, musicians shouldn't be releasing their full albums on streaming sites to enhance both the user experience and to actually help fund their musical careers. It's a win-win situation. That's all my hot takes for the day, and I'm glad you stuck around to listen to me rant. And I got to give it up to Brad Nunnery from Signal Chords, the home of the underground, and John Montross from Punk Rock Radar for inspiring this episode. I love those guys. I'm going to put their links to their shows and stuff in the show notes, so go check out those links below. And also the music that I talked about today. So you're going to get some of those bands that I mentioned. I'm going to pop them in the show notes as well. And remember that the Powered by Rock podcast is powered by our listeners. To show us some support, please be sure to subscribe and share the podcast on social media. You can also click below to make a donation to the podcast to help us keep making some awesome episodes with awesome guests. You can see the full video interview on our YouTube channel and on Spotify now as well. If you want to check out some of our awesome content or just shop for merch and gear, hey, merch and gear, right? Head to poweredbyrock.com to see what's good there. That's our show for today. I'll see you soon for the next episode. Until then, rock on.
Supposed to be easy, it's coming